tonight, UN Syria envoy says the next round of peace talks will be delayed by 2 days to allow the cessation of hostilities in Syria to take hold, and Assad describes the truce a glimmer of hope. Iraqi security forces begin an operation to dislodge Daesh from desert areas northwest of Baghdad and repel an attack by Daesh in Abu Ghraib, saying the situation is fully under control. And it's Super Tuesday in the U.S., the biggest single day of state-by-state presidential nominating contest for the November 8th election to succeed President Barack Obama. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Jordan marks today the 60th anniversary of the Arabization of the Jordan Armed Forces. In 1956, His Majesty King Hussein Arabized the High Command of the JAF through the removal of British officers, foremost Lieutenant General John Bagot Glob, the British commander of the Arab Legion. In March 1957, the Anglo-Jordanian Agreement was abrogated, followed by the evacuation of British forces from the kingdom. On the occasion, His Majesty King Abdullah received cables of congratulations from senior officials and officers. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour met at his office with President of the International Medical Aid Organization, Médecins Sans Frontières, voicing appreciation of the organization's humanitarian efforts, especially to sick or injured Syrian refugees. The President, Joanne Liu, is leading a delegation on a visit to the kingdom. Liu presented a briefing on MSF activities in Jordan provided through the Muwasat Hospital in Amman and other medical institutions in Irbid and Ramtha. The organization relies largely on Jordanian medical and paramedical expertise, the majority of the workforce, totaling 560 doctors, nurses and administratives, being Jordanian. Mansour expressed hopes for Médecins Sans Frontières services to grow nationwide and benefit all Syrian refugees in the various governorates, pledging the government's full support to MSF in its endeavors. Hundreds of Palestinian mourners marched in the funeral of a Palestinian man killed in a gun battle with Israeli occupation forces near the West Bank city of Ramallah. The Israeli army claimed that Israeli soldiers shot at a Palestinian during a gunfight in the occupied West Bank as troops fought to rescue two soldiers who were attacked after straying into a violent trouble spot. The Palestinian Red Crescent said a 22-year-old man died of gunshot wounds and 6 were wounded in the violence at the Qalandia refugee camp. Israel's chief military spokesman said 5 soldiers were hurt. An Israeli police spokeswoman said 5 paramilitary border policemen deployed to help extract the 2 soldiers were also injured. The Israeli army has killed since October at least 170 Palestinians, 112 of whom Israel says were assailants, while most others were shot dead during anti-Israeli protests. UN Syria envoy Staffan de Mistura said the next round of Syria peace talks will be delayed by 2 days to allow the cessation of hostilities to take hold. While the level of violence in Syria has decreased considerably, there have been reports by international observers of violations of the truce agreement. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and the opposition both say the other side is violating the truce. However, Assad told a German TV network that the Syrian army did not react to truce violations in order to give the agreement a chance, describing it as a glimpse of hope. Speaking in Geneva, de Mistura said for logistical and technical reasons, the talks would begin on the 9th. The talks were initially scheduled for the 7th. He said he expects to see attempts to disrupt the ceasefire, but such attempts must be contained to avoid undermining the credibility of the truce.
We don't want discussions in Geneva to become a discussion about infringements or not of the ceasefire. We want them to actually address the core of everything. Remember, all this is meant to stop the fighting in order to have more humanitarian aid. But the solution of everything is a political solution. These are facilitating the political solution, but they are crucial. So we will be, in the next few days, analyzing how far both the ceasefire and the humanitarian access has come so that they don't become hostages of the talks and the talks don't become hostages of
The Jordanian security forces have clashed with extremists as part of a manhunt in the northern city of Irbid. Riot police and special forces have taken part in this large-scale operation, which is still ongoing. At least three members of the security forces were injured and are being treated, and we will be giving you more information in the course of the evening. And back to our news. A UN statement issued after a meeting between UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the two have agreed on the need to urgently implement the cessation of hostilities agreement in Syria, provide humanitarian assistance to civilians, and for the warring parties to return to the table for political negotiations. Ban and Lavrov met at the UN European headquarters in Geneva, where the UN chief thanked Lavrov for his significant role in achieving recent progress on Syria, according to the statement. Speaking at the UN Human Rights Council, Lavrov said human rights issues are not an excuse to interfere in any state's internal affairs, and the humanitarian crisis in Syria should not be exploited by those aiming at regime change. Further, he said the restoration of the country is possible only through ensuring sustainable ceasefire and beginning an inclusive all-Syrian dialogue about the future of the country without external interference.
We see a serious danger in attempts to falsely interpret obligations in the field of human rights, to change the format of the work of the United Nations and its bodies, under the slogan of a new reading of the concept of human rights, to impose non-universal views and values, to the detriment of the intergovernmental character of the organization and the principle of the sovereign equality of states. Unfortunately, we observe such attempts in the context of the Syrian crisis, where the humanitarian dimension is blatantly exploited by those conceiving the ideas of change, unwanted regimes, and even redrawing borders in violation of the UN Security Council resolutions.
Here at home at the Zaatari camp, the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, and its partners marked the safe delivery of the 5,000th baby to be born among Syrian refugees. The infants were born in UNFPA-supported clinics inside the camp, which first opened in 2013. The 5,000th baby, Rima, was born on the 21st of February, and since then there have been 50 more births. Rima's father has been living in Zaatari for almost 3 years and met his wife there and started a family. The health clinic manages an average of 8 to 10 deliveries every day and holds seminars to raise awareness about the dangers of pregnancy at a young age, as one area of concern for the humanitarian agency is the number of women under the age of 18 who are giving birth in the camp, accounting to 5% of the total deliveries at the clinic. A UNFPA official said it was important to put a spotlight on women's needs during conflicts.
Today is very important because what we want to do is to highlight the needs of women. We want to highlight that in a crisis like the Syrian refugee crisis, women face challenges that make them more vulnerable, and one of those challenges is pregnancy. Women get pregnancy whether there's an emergency or not, whether there's a war or not, and so what's going to happen during the 9 months of that pregnancy? What we want is a successful outcome. What we want is a healthy baby at the end of that 9 months. So what we're trying to do today is saying that isn't going to happen unless the services are there. And so what we're trying to do is in Zaatari camp, in Jordan, in the other camps in the other countries, is provide services so women can have a healthy outcome for their pregnancies.
In Iraq, a senior Iraqi army officer and 7 others were killed overnight when Daesh terrorists attacked a military headquarters near the town of Haditha, according to Iraqi security officials. Brigadier Ali Aboud, the command's chief of staff, was killed when 4 attackers stormed the entrance to the base and clashed with soldiers. Initial investigations showed the terrorists managed to reach the base by dressing in army uniforms, said the security officials. Haditha and its nearby dam are in one of the few parts of the province of Anbar still controlled by Iraqi forces and local police backed by tribal fighters. Daesh has claimed responsibility for a string of attacks in recent days in and around Baghdad and in the eastern province of Diyala, which has killed more than 100 people. Meanwhile, Iraqi security forces and Shiite militia began an operation to dislodge Daesh from desert areas northwest of Baghdad and cut their supply routes between western Anbar province and the northern city of Mosul. Military officials said the Iraqi army, federal police, counter-terrorism forces and Hashd al-Sha'bi are participating in the military campaign and were deployed on the fronts with air support from the Iraqi and coalition air force. Elsewhere, members of Hashd al-Sha'bi backed by Iraqi forces repelled an attack last night by Daesh in Abu Ghraib district on the outskirts of the capital, describing the situation in the area as fully under control. Security forces had mostly regained control by Sunday evening, but officials said there were still clashes. A curfew was imposed as a regiment of Iraq's elite counter-terrorism forces was mobilized to retake the silo in Abu Ghraib and prevent the terrorists approaching the nearby airport. Iraqi army helicopters bombarded Daesh positions and at least 20 Daesh fighters were killed in the counter-offensive. And in the ongoing war on Daesh, the US-led coalition conducted 27 strikes against a group in Iraq and Syria in its latest round of daily attacks. According to the combined joint task force leading the operations, 15 strikes in Iraq targeted the terrorists near 8 cities, including Fallujah, Mosul and Ramadi. Altogether, the strikes hit 2 Daesh tactical units, as well as several of its vehicles and mortar positions. And in Syria, 12 strikes near 5 cities hit 6 Daesh tactical units and 8 buildings, among other targets. Television pictures of migrants desperate to make their way into Western Europe via the Balkans show the urgency of a European Union summit next Monday in tackling the bloc's migrant crisis, said German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Speaking during a joint news conference with visiting Croatian Prime Minister in Berlin, Merkel said, "We want to reinstate Schengen." Asked what she would tell the 8,500 refugees stuck at the Greek border town of Idomeni, where hundreds of migrants stormed the border yesterday and Macedonian police fired tear gas to disperse them, Merkel said preparations will also include Greece. Migrants have become stranded in Greece after Austria and countries along the Balkans migration route imposed restrictions on their borders, limiting the numbers able to cross.
We have now begun a wide variety of preparations, also in Greece. Hot spots have been set up in parts. Greece is in some places behind schedule. There are overnight accommodations and places to rest, also in Greece, which the refugees should make use of it.
The United Nations says the build-up of thousands of migrants and refugees on Greece's northern borders is fast turning into a humanitarian disaster as the European Union prepares to offer more financial aid. The UNHCR, meanwhile, urged all EU member states to reinforce their capacity to register and process asylum seekers through their national procedures, as well as through an EU relocation scheme. Here's more.
Thousands of migrants remain stranded on the border between Greece and Macedonia. Fears are mounting that numbers will swell to uncontrollable levels. Frustration is boiling over. Macedonian police fired tear gas on Monday to disperse migrants as they stormed a border, tearing down a metal gate in the process.
I think the people are angry, so we can't control them.
Restrictions have been imposed on people moving through the Balkans, and a deeply divided Europe is struggling to respond. The conditions in this camp are dire. It is cold and the rain is heavy.
The situation was very bad, sir. We are here from 4 days. We had a swimming time last night. Our tent is so wet, like our clothes. It was a very difficult night.
Officials say the number of migrants and refugees trapped in Greece could triple in the coming days.
In the U.S. race to the White House, it's Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is the biggest single day of state-by-state presidential nominating contest for the November 8 election to succeed President Barack Obama. Candidates bidding for their party's nomination face their biggest test yet in the Super Tuesday primary polls as voting stretches from eastern states to Texas and Minnesota. 11 states cast votes for candidates from either the Republican or Democratic parties or both in a contest seen as make or break for the hopefuls. There have been earlier votes in 4 states. In the Democratic race, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton would go a long way toward cementing her path to the nomination if she scores big victories of her own over Bernie Sanders. Meanwhile, Donald Trump looked poised to strengthen his lead in the Republican presidential race, an outcome likely to intensify concerns among party leaders who consider him a usurper of the Republican throne. To France and the first day of the Paris Fashion Week. Young Dutch designer Liesloor Vrouwen kicked off the week with her whimsical autumn-winter ready-to-wear collection dubbed Let's Hear It for the Lions. The collection bursts with colorful and feminine forms, which came to life through Harlequin-style patterns and airy materials. Models strutted around the edges of a large Paris apartment building, wearing brightly colored blazers, dresses, and skirts layered with materials featuring punched-out holes that helped to imitate polka dots. The outfits were decorated with round wooden necklaces and various green foam accessories, giving the collection a finished yet eclectic feel. Paris Fashion Week ready-to-wear runs through the 9th. Martin Jol has become the second former English Premier League manager to take charge of a Cairo club this week after being appointed coach of Al-Ahli. Jol replaced Portuguese José Peseiro, who left last month to join Porto. The 60-year-old Dutchman follows in the footsteps of former Aston Villa and Birmingham City manager Alex McLeish, who took the reins at Al-Ahli's bitter rivals Zamalek last week. Jol spent 3 years at Tottenham Hotspur and has also previously coached Ajax Amsterdam, Hamburg SV and Fulham. Al-Ahli lead the Egyptian Championship by 3 points from Zamalek, just past the midway point of the season. The Toro Rosso Formula One team unveiled its 2016 World Championship challenger, the STR11, in its new livery. The car is the first to be developed since the team switched from Renault to year-old Ferrari engines and will be driven by the same young lineup as last season of Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. Ferrari supplied Toro Rosso from 2007 to 2013. Ferrari finished the season as overall runners-up, with their engine more reliable and offering better performance than the Renault unit used by Toro Rosso. And finally, relatively cold weather continues in hilly areas for the rest of tonight, but it remains fair in other regions with southeasterly moderate to brisk winds. Tomorrow, warm but dry and dusty conditions prevail across most of the kingdom with southeasterly high winds. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect hot conditions with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Here now is our temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. UN Syria envoy says the next round of peace talks will be delayed by 2 days to allow the cessation of hostilities in Syria to take hold, and Assad describes the truce a glimmer of hope. Iraqi security forces begin an operation to dislodge Daesh from desert areas northwest of Baghdad and repel an attack by Daesh in Abu Ghraib, saying the situation is fully under control. And it's Super Tuesday in the U.S., the biggest single day of state-by-state presidential nominating contest for the November 8 election to succeed President Barack Obama. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Ali Furqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.